Hello, everyone, and today is a very special day. You see, I am in Washington, D.C., standing in front of the Washington National Cathedral, the final resting place of the United States 28th President, Woodrow Wilson, who died a century ago today, February 3rd, 1924. He died at 11:15 a.m., and currently it is now 9:39 a.m. So we're about, an hour and 45 minutes early. But 100 years ago, this time, Woodrow Wilson was taking his final breaths. Now, he was president from 1913 to 1921, oversaw the creation of the Federal Reserve, signed the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, and also was president during the Great War, World War I, from 1917 to 1918. This cathedral, Wilson holds the distinction of being the only president to be buried within Washington, D.C., which is kind of surprising. You might argue that Taft and Kennedy are, but they're actually buried in Arlington Cemetery, which is in Virginia, not D.C. So I've been outside the cathedral, but this is my first time actually seeing Woodrow Wilson's grave. I was here 2 years ago, but I wasn't able to see it. So in honor of Woodrow Wilson, today we're going to be screaming Woodrow Wilson for smash, exactly 100 years after he died. So let's go. All right, so now we're at more of a side view of the cathedral. You can see how massive this place is. I mean, it looks like a medieval castle. I'm not even kidding. Look at that. That is ridiculous. So yeah, Woodrow Wilson is buried in there. So Wilson, he was born in Staunton, Virginia. Actually the last president to be born in Virginia, but he really grew up in Georgia. He was born on December 28th, 1856. He grew up during the Civil War, and after Reconstruction was starting to, settle down, he eventually graduated from Princeton University in 1879, and he received his PhD in 1886. He's the only president to ever have a PhD in philosophy, history, and political science. And he actually served as the president of Princeton University, one of the most prestigious colleges in the United States, from 1902 to 1910. And then he became governor of New Jersey a year later, from 1911 to 1913. Only served 2 years as governor, but he was very effective at passing progressive reforms during his term as governor, and he was able to win the Democratic primary for president in 1912, defeating incumbent President Taft for re-election in 1912, and he won. And he also he served as president for 2 terms, from 1913 to 1921. Like I previously said before, in 1913, the first year he was president, he passed the Federal Reserve Act, which was one of the most important acts ever passed because it established the Federal Reserve, also more commonly known as the Fed today, because previously the National Bank of the United States was very weak before that, and he kind of changed the entire economic policy that the United States was known by at that time. And he got us out of the war. We stayed out of the war, stayed neutral. World War I broke out in 1914. And from 1914 to 1917, we stayed neutral. And he did not get us involved in the war. And that's the ticket he ran on in 1916 for re-election, which he won because he said we stayed out of the war. However, previously in 1915, there was a ship called the Lusitania that was sunk by German U-boats and killed about 120 Americans. And then later on, with conflicts with the Zimmermann telegram, which was being where the German Empire was sending secret messages to Mexico during the war, sparked us to get involved in 1917 with World War I. And so Wilson wasn't too fond. In 1919, after the war, he suffered from a stroke that basically left him paralyzed and disabled for the rest of his life. And you're probably wondering, how did he serve the last 2 years of his term? Well, basically, his wife ended up running most things, his wife, Edith Wilson. Now, Vice President Thomas Riley Marshall did not take over. He believed that it was going to be he believed it to be unconstitutional for him to become president, as Woodrow Wilson is still alive. But Wilson obviously ran the things, signed the documents, but his wife was, for the last 2 years of his term, last 2 years of his second term, really running the country. So you could argue she was the first female president. Women also gained the right to vote in 1920 during Woodrow Wilson's presidency, although he was not completely activist towards making that happen. Woodrow Wilson is not too fond by most historians today because of his ideologies, but you cannot deny the impact that he had on this country. The passage of his progressive reforms and the Federal Reserve Committee and Act was very revolutionary and pushed this country into the 20th century. So I think Wilson did a good job at that. So also in this cathedral is also Helen Keller, the famous woman who was blind and deaf, is also buried in here. There's a couple more prominent people. I'm not sure if we're going to be able to film inside, but let's do the scream. He died at 11:15, but I want to be in at his gravesite at 11:15. So we're going to scream out here because he deserves it, as do all presidents. Woodrow Wilson for smash! All right, we're going to see if we can go inside in about 10 to 20 minutes. He died at 11:15. If we get in there, we're probably not allowed to scream. I don't know if we're allowed to film. If we are, we'll show some clips, and we'll say Woodrow Wilson for smash right at him, close and personal, because he deserves it. Now, 100 years ago, he was about dead, and he died of that stroke, which left him disabled the last couple of years of his life. He left office in 1921. He was dead by 1924. His successor was Warren Harding. Warren Harding died 2 years in. So Coolidge was actually president when Wilson died. But Wilson only died 6 months after Harding did. And Wilson, he was 67 years old, and he lived at his house here in Washington, D.C., spent his retirement here. Like I said, he was disabled and paralyzed from the stroke pretty much the last 5 years of his life. But he did spend all of his retirement years here in Washington, D.C. And we're actually going to check out his house after this. And they're supposedly opening a new exhibit today for the Centennial. So we might put that on film. We'll see. So Wilson's very back here. We still have it's 10:37, so we still have 38 minutes before we need to do our business. No access. They do still worship. They have flags of they have every single state flag up there. This is the federal district. It's kind of Washington National. This is basically the national church of the United States, essentially. Okay. Here's the burial site. President Woodrow Wilson, 1856 and 1924. Died 100 years ago today, February 3rd, 1924. Currently 11:02. He had 13 minutes from now. We're going to say Woodrow Wilson for smash in honor. And then they have a loving memory of Edith Bowling Wilson, who I talked about earlier, buried in the vault beneath this bay. There it is. This is one of the few U.S. president graves that you can actually physically touch and get really close to, as it's got the cross on top here. Amazing. Amazing. It said they had the flags of every single state and territory up there. All right, guys, it's currently 11:13. Woodrow Wilson has been dead for 99 years. 364 days, 23 hours, and 58 minutes. 2 minutes, 100 years. See that? Here. Oh, there's his inaugural address and his war message to Congress. You can see you're actually standing on the seal of the President of the United States. 11:14, less than 60 seconds to go. Woodrow Wilson for smash! There we go, guys. Exactly 100 years ago this minute, Woodrow Wilson passed away. February 3rd, 1924, 11:15 a.m. It's an honor. So we just finished up at the cathedral, had some lunch, and now we're on, this is the very street that Woodrow Wilson lived on and the house that he died in 100 years ago today up here. Now previously what I wanted to mention, Wilson was president during the First World War. After that, he was a big leader in the creation of the League of Nations. And he gave his famous 14 points on why the U.S. should join. The U.S. ultimately did not join, and the League of Nations was a fail. Because the Congress would not ratify it. Therefore, the United States did not end up joining League of Nations. And I think, but yeah, he lived down here, and I think they have a centennial event going on for him today, hopefully, because no one at the cathedral actually realized that it was 100 years ago today that he died. So when you're driving up on the main road, you can see Street in W. The President Woodrow Wilson House. Here we go, guys. Alright, now I highly doubt we're going to be able to film in here. Alright, so this is the exhibit that just opened today. It's the Centennial Exhibit. They have a bunch of artifacts in here. This is his hat that he wore. He was a big baseball guy. It's the hat that he wore on the USS Woodrow Wilson. Got a map of World War I. He was very famous for his canes as well. And this is a bullet shell from the very first shot fired by an American unit in October 1913. Over here is really cool. So these are the legendary glasses that you always see Woodrow Wilson wearing. And his hat is known for his top hat and his glasses. There's one of his many canes that he had. In addition to his growing collection, his stroke in 1919 caused Wilson to use the cane for more utilitarian purposes. And then we have his Bible, the Woodrow Wilson Bible. These are all real artifacts from when he died 100 years ago in his house. The pictures look really cool. Another cane. The stroke that he had in 1919 pretty much affected him the rest of his life. This is a letter from the NAACP from 1913. It says, we respectfully protest against the policy of your administration in segregating colored employees in departments of Washington. Yeah, not like that regard. But yeah, this is really cool here. Our life preserver. That liberty shall not perish, but the earth by liberty bonds. Newspaper articles and stuff. But yeah, this place has remained largely untouched the last 100 years, so that's one of the unique things about it, that most historic houses are not. Do it over here, sit down. All right, guys, that's going to conclude it for the Woodrow Wilson Centennial Special. Just thought we'd end it off in front of the most iconic building in America, the White House. So with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to comment, like, and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Wah!